Good evening. My name is Leslie Bell Stanton, and the entrepreneur that I've selected for this week's discussion post is Dr. Thomas Holmes, who was a medical surgeon and a coroner's assistant in New York City in the 1840s and 1850s. Now, during this time, there were two things going on with Dr. Holmes. One, he was studying the work of arterial embalming introduced by Jean-Nicolas Gonel of France, and he was also noticing that there were some issues with the embalming fluids and solutions that the medical students were using to embalm cadavers for medical and anatomical procedures and studies. He noticed that they were becoming ill, they were becoming injured, and they were dying. And he noted that it was because of the dangerous and toxic poisonous ingredients in the embalming fluid, like mercury, zinc, and arsenic. So he began experimenting with different kinds of ingredients, and he came up with a much safer embalming solution. So enter the American Civil War, and the process of embalming literally burst on the scene during the American Civil War. And the undertaker is actually going to take a first responder's role to the battlefields. Now, battlefields in cities at that point were described as pest holes. There were vermin that were in the sewers, the dead bodies. There were latrines spilling over into well water and rivers. There was a lot of pollution. And then there were a lot of bodies laying around in different states of decomposition that are littering the ground. And these locations became sanitation and disease nightmares. So embalming became a very, very good solution for this kind of an issue. And during the American Civil War, there are two major competing types of embalming. The throat cutters, who entered through the jugular vein and did arterial embalming. And then there were the belly punchers, and those were the ones that entered through the abdominal cavities and added the solutions. The arterial was preferred because the body was kept in a better shape to be sent home. Now, Dr. Holmes has a superior product. He has a superior technique, and he has a ready and high-profile clients. But he didn't have a blank check, because at this point, undertakers, usually cabinet makers, were expanding their cabinets into coffins, and they also decided, hey, we can go into the embalming business as well too, and they set up embalming stations on the battlefields to take care of the soldiers. Now, one source that I found reported that a gallon of embalming fluid, a typical embalming fluid, was $3. It also reported that in the earlier part of the war, embalming prices were $50 for an officer, $25 for an enlisted man, and the price later increased to $80 for an officer and $30 for an enlisted soldier. Dr. Holmes actually charged about $100. So, in looking at Frischman, Marcino, and Romella's article on the Commons, Tragedy of the Commons, there are two things that they highlight: the competition exclusion principle and the competition will destroy itself. So that looks at the fact that if two species are sharing the similar environment and using the similar resources, they're going to drive out the others. And then the other says that basically, if one person lowers their prices, then they're going to get more business. These things really didn't seem to apply in this particular situation because there were a lot of clients. So it may be true, but Dr. Holmes made a fortune anyway. So in a letter to the editor that I found of the New York Times in 1862, the writer really rails on these extortionist embalmers and how much they cost and the prices that they charge. And he hands over a recipe that was given to him by the medical director of the 9th Army Corps right after the Battle of Antietam. And he did that so that any physician or surgeon could embalm the dead and preserve them from decomposition. So kind of cutting the market out there. Fairly unknown. As a summary, Dr. Holmes rose to fame during the American Civil War. He also performed embalming for some high-profile clients, including Colonel Elmer Ephraim Ellsworth, who was a friend of Abraham Lincoln's and the first casualty of the war, as well as the President Lincoln himself. Now, ultimately, Dr. Holmes was presented a perfect economic and financial storm. He had developed a service or high-quality technique of embalming the body. He had a safer and superior product of embalming fluid and arterial injection pump that he invented. And he also had a ready-made clientele. Thank you.